My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired.
Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the GlowCloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and I am here today to help answer any career questions you have. Maybe you have a goal on becoming a cloud architect or a solutions architect or an AI architect or a security architect, and you could use some help to get there. Well, that's why I'm here to answer any career questions you may have. So bring us your questions so we can do anything we can to help you. I've been every kind of IT architect you can imagine, a network architect, security architect, cloud architect, enterprise architect. I've done all these roles for the last 25 years. I've loved all of them. And I've spent about 2 decades helping people just like you get your first tech job, get promoted in tech. And people that I've worked with are now working at Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, PNC Bank, Zscaler, Netskope, Palo Alto Networks, and all kinds of companies. So I want to do anything I can to help you. Before we actually start answering your questions, I want to tell you about a couple of free things we have going on for you, and some other things that I'm totally excited about. We are on our Memorial Day sale currently right now, which means 50% off on all products for a very short period of time. That's for our paid programs. I also want to tell everybody that tomorrow we're going to run our free webinar on how to become a cloud architect, but we'll go over other architect roles if you desire, like security architect, enterprise architect, AI architect. We'll talk about what we do in these roles. We'll talk about the actual skills you need in these roles. We'll talk about the certifications that will be good for these roles and how to stand out and get so you can get hired and not be auto rejected in a sea of auto rejections from others. So we'll talk about how to do that, and it's all free. You can sign up for that. My team just dropped the link to the chat box for that session. And I also want to tell you that next week we're going to do, and the week after that, we're going to do a completely free Google Professional Cloud Architect Certification Bootcamp to prepare you for the Google Professional Cloud Architect Certification. Sign up. It's free. So please bring me any kind of career questions you have so that I can do anything I can to help guide you and get you to your goals. Looks like I see a question or two coming in. Chris, I think you're behind the scenes today. Chris, can you bring in the first question? Flying kites, how important is it to understand enterprise architecture principles when moving into cloud architecture? Oh, that's a really good question, flying kites. And I actually made a video. Chris, if it's possible behind the scenes at some point to provide a link for that video that I created on why every cloud architect should learn enterprise architecture. So flying kites, let's really talk about what architecture is. At the end of the day, real architecture is about designing a system, and that system includes people, processes, and technology that's going to get the client's business to achieve greater results. So maybe that business is a hospital and they want more people to get saved versus have negative outcomes in the hospital. Maybe it's a retailer that's trying to increase their revenue and at the same time constrain their expenses. So in every architecture, there's always going to be a reason for it. Now, if we align, and this is what enterprise architecture is, the people with the best way to the optimal way to do something, and then we give them the technology that best suits their needs, that's enterprise architecture. And truthfully, that should be cloud architecture. So I say that's very important. Now, why do I say it's so critical? Because when people don't start into business and they just focus on the tech, like you would be taught in a certification, which is not architecture, all you do is design a tech, and the tech probably doesn't solve the business's problem or help that business in any way. And when people start with tech-related architectures instead of business-driven architectures, 70 to 80% of the time, there is zero benefits coming of that architecture for the business. It's just wasted money. So it's critical to understand at least the concepts of enterprise architecture. And the concept is aligning people, processes, and technology. And let's talk about why this matters. So let's say you have sales reps in your organization. And a great sales rep can sell $10 million a year of product. And truthfully, any great sales rep can sell $10 million a year of product. But you've got some sales reps that are doing it one way, and they're able to generate $1 million of product. Another sales rep has their own system, and they're generating $2 million of product. And another person has their own system and generates $3 million. But the people that are doing it the best way are always generating $10 million. So that's what, when we look at the business, we have to look at, is there a best way to do things? Now, I'm not a fast food person, but if you go to a McDonald's, they can get your Big Mac fries and a Coke pretty much in any country in the world to make it all look fairly identical and at a high rate of speed. Now, that's because they have a very strong process that's needed for a business like that. Likewise, a different business might need less stringent processes based on the goals, but it's all about finding the correct process. I promise you, McDonald's in New York versus San Francisco would be different if there wasn't a process. So that's one component, is finding the best way for people to do their jobs. Now, the next part of it is making sure you have the right people in the right places as part of enterprise architecture. You know, you might have some people that are really great people in the wrong spot, so you want to move them in a place where they're successful. Now, the last part of it is the technology. You want the technology to support the business and the way it needs it. So if I have a physician, I want the technology to work the way the physician actually works. And that would make healthcare better. Now, if it changes the way the physician has to do their job, for example, because the healthcare doesn't support the way they normally work, it will generally hurt patient care. But if it can augment the way the doctor or the nurse practitioner or physician assistant does these things, it'll improve their care, just like a sales rep or anyone else. So enterprise architecture is about aligning people, processes, and technology. And when you do that in your multi-cloud architectures, they effectively become enterprise architectures, because the reality is all cloud architectures in today's world are hybrid multi-cloud. You're dealing with 2 to 3 clouds plus a data center, a couple of co-location sites all over the world. So it all really needs that big enterprise architecture focus, that big multi-cloud architect focus, the people, the processes, technology. It's a really great question, Flying Kites. I'm glad you asked it. And if others have questions about your career, please bring them in. You have another one. Your peers keep telling you to do labs, but you have heard me say that labs are not what gets you hired. What do I mean by this? So what you're asking is actually a really good question. Now, the first thing I'd like to ask you, Flying Kites, is what role you actually want, because that's going to determine whether you should do labs, you shouldn't do labs, or the kind of labs you should do. So I need to know the role you write. And I'm curious, the people that are actually telling you to do labs, are they working in the job you want? Or are there people that are still trying to get a job that are doing labs because somebody else told them to do labs? I really want to make sure I understand those two. So in the meantime, and I'm going to say, we have to do whatever the right hands-on skills are for the job. And when I get these answers from you, I'll be in a better place to answer them. But at least in the short term, when it comes to getting hired, we're hiring someone based upon their judgment, their knowledge, and their capabilities. So what I mean by knowledge, judgment, and capabilities is, it's not whether you have the Okay, it's a study group of your peers. You're preparing to become solutions architects. Gotcha. So what you're telling me is a bunch of people that don't know what an architect does is giving you advice on the way to get hired about a job that they don't understand. That's what I wanted to clarify first, because if you were asking a bunch of architects, they probably wouldn't tell you that. So, okay, I understand that. So now that I know the role, I can get more specific. So the reason I say labs can be somewhat helpful, but will never be enough to get a job as an architect is as follows. As an architect, it's not about how to. In fact, we don't configure anything in our jobs. It's about choosing the right technologies and selecting the technologies that are going to augment the business. It's about knowing the underlying technology, knowing how the underlying technology works, and knowing how the underlying technology could fit together. It's about knowing where the weaknesses in a technology are, the strengths are in a technology, and it's the trade-offs in a technology. And I can tell you where the people that do a lot of labs fail is they learn how to. And the common thing that I see, there's a bunch of like there was an AWS intern that's guiding everyone to build a WordPress website and stick it on AWS. Now, here's what you learn if you build a WordPress website and you stick it on AWS. You learn how to build a WordPress website, which you definitely wouldn't do as a solutions architect. You do learn how to turn on a virtual machine in AWS. You do learn how to install a web server like Apache or Nginx. You do learn that. You do learn how to set up a default route going out to an internet gateway. And that's what you learn how to do. Now, in your job, you'll never be doing that in your life. But in your job, these are the questions that will be asked to you. They will say, okay, how did you choose the compute capacity of this application? How many cores did you use? How much DRAM did you use? What kind of calculations did you use to do that? Or did the developers tell you what you needed? How did you harden the operating system to this to make sure that it was secure? What things were done to it? Why did you choose Nginx over Apache? What were the strengths and weaknesses of each and every architect of the options you had here? What type of endpoint protection did you deploy, and what was the architectural rationale of the endpoint protection that you chose? Now, when you connected to the internet and you decided to secure this, did you use WAF? Did you use the next generation firewall? Did you use both? Why or why not? What are the architectural advantages of a next generation firewall over WAF? What does WAF do better than a next generation firewall? Did you use an IDS IPS system in your architecture? Now, in your architecture for this WordPress website, you're using customer IAM versus internal IAM. And do you know the difference, and can you explain those to me? So see, flying kites as an architect, I need to be thinking about that. And that's really the big thing. It's thinking about that. And the sad reality is you just don't get that by doing labs. In fact, the best way it reminded me is when I became a CCI about 25 years ago. My CCI number is 7417. And in the CCIE exam, they actually handed you the disk, which was the instruction manual to all the Cisco routers. And yet the exam had like a 90% failure rate. And here's the reason why. They would say, create an area in OSPF that can take external routes to be redistributed in, but it can't have any type 5 LSAs, and it can't inside that area. And, you know, what the heck does that mean? Now, if you knew they were looking for a not so stubby area, then realistically speaking, and I think I drew the wrong area, but if you knew exactly which area they were talking about, then you're in a position to actually know how to configure it. You could even look it up. But if you don't understand the LSAs, what's in a normal area versus a stub area versus a totally stubby area versus a not so stubby area, you wouldn't even know where to begin. And that's realistically the thing that's going on. Someone says, Mike, I can configure BGP to AWS. And I say, okay, you've got 2 links. What did you do to protect against out-of-order packets? Or did you block one link, or are you load sharing? If so, how are you load sharing without getting out-of-order packets? What decisions did you use and why? So it's more of the why behind your decisions than the how. Look, I have no problem getting hands-on, design and architecture for a reason, and in your training, go build it. That's fine. I even have all my students build the cloud from scratch because I think it's a fun exercise. When someone else is worried about turning in their BPC, my students can create the entire cloud, and that way they know what it is. But the key is you have to learn the skills for the job. So the technical knowledge for the architect is about the underlying technology. It's about the underlying network. It's about the underlying compute options, the underlying storage options, the applications that drive transformation, the type of security you could use. And it's the same stuff, and then a data center as a cloud. So I hope that helps. So no problem building it. Nothing wrong with building it. But you have to know what you're building. Because that way, when someone puts down, I configured a table in DynamoDB, what they're not prepared for is, why did you choose DynamoDB? What are the architectural problems we'll have choosing DynamoDB in the average enterprise, where 98% of enterprises are multi-cloud? Why did you compare the strengths and weaknesses of DynamoDB versus MongoDB versus Apache Cassandra, and the way I could have utilized them in this architecture? That's where the question becomes. It doesn't go to how to configure it. So nothing wrong with knowing how to configure, but it doesn't teach design, and it doesn't teach how the technology works. Hope that helps. Chris, we can bring in the next one. As a network engineer move into an architecture role, does it make sense to get a CCDE or move to a technical architecture role as a network architect and an enterprise architect as a second step? Now, Andy, I'm actually going to give you some real guidance here. And I spent about a decade at Cisco, and I can tell you what actually happened to me there. So in my youth, I was a network engineer. When I started networking, and I'm not joking, within 9 months, I loved it. I was so crazy infatuated with networking from the time I said I'm going to become a network engineer. I was a CCIE within 9 months. I lived, breathed, ate it, and slept it. This is 25 years ago. My CCIE number is 7417, back when it was 2 days long. I immediately moved into a technical network architect role, which was fine. And after I moved into that architect role, I moved into this principal solutions architect role, which was a tech role, and that was fine. Then I had an opportunity to be a chief enterprise architect for the healthcare vertical at Cisco, and I took that job. And when I was in that job, Andy, everything changed. Now, when I was in that role, one of my managers suggested I remove the CCIE and the CISSP from my business card. And I asked them why, because I had worked so hard for it. And they said, Mike, you're in an executive architect position. Do you want to be seen as an executive, or do you want to be seen as an engineer? There's a big difference between where you're going, pay, and strategy in the business side. So personally, I took the CCIE off my business card. I acted like I wasn't as technical, started doing bigger leadership things, started building bigger architecture teams and leading those architecture teams. And my career was like a rocket ship. I mean, it was the greatest thing that happened. So I'd probably, if my goal was to actually ultimately become an enterprise architect, get the training to be an enterprise architect. We provide training there. But whatever you need to do, it's going to require a lot of business acumen. I got a lot of leadership, a lot of sales, a lot of executive presence. And this is what I did. And then poof, I was in these roles. And I loved it. But I also had fun being a network architect too in my youth. It was a fun job. Now, let's be fair. There's a couple $100,000 a year more feasible in these chief architect roles than most network architect roles. But they're both great. They can both be fun. I've done both roles. I love both roles, and it's been, my life. So, either one is good. What would make you happier? Do you want to be focused on architecture issues on the network, or do you want to be focused on architecture issues in the business? Is your goal network planning and route planning and route aggregation planning and peering point planning and scalability planning? If it is, that's network architecture, and that could be really cool. But if your goal is, how do I make this business better with technology? And you take it from a little networking and some security and some compute and some storage, and it's all about, how do I try for transformation? That's where your salary options are going to be. That's where you're getting more promoted to the CIO role or a CTO role. So that's where I like it. But both are good. I love network architect roles. There's always going to be needed, and there are great roles. So either or could be good. Great question, Andy. Please please bring your questions. We want to do what we can to help. How do you answer the question, how much would you like to be paid? Also, what is the wrong way to answer this question and why? So, realistically speaking, there's 2 times this question could be asked. And there's a time where you should answer it, and there's a time where you should not. If someone asks initially, what are your salary expectations? And you don't even know what the job is, how could you or anyone have a salary expectation? And let's put it this way. Okay, I have a car to sell you. It's $100,000. Is it a good deal or a bad deal? Well, if it's $20,000 car that you're paying $100,000 for, you just got ripped off. But if it's a Lamborghini or a Ferrari that's new, you just made out like a bandit. So it's no different. How much do you want to be paid if you don't even know what the job actually entails, because you're going to have no idea from the job description. So there's that side of it for you. Now, the other side of this that I want you to think about, Freedom Lands, is as follows. What if you know you're worth $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 plus, and you say that first, and all they think they can pay is $250,000 for the role? Then they won't even interview you in the first place, which means that's there. So let's talk strategy, and then I'll tell you how to answer the question. In a strategic world, you go in there, you didn't answer this question. We'll talk about options that you have for this question later. And you went in there and you did the interview. After you did the interview, now you've got some information. Did you do so good on the interview that while you're there in the first interview, they said, I'm going to hire you? It's happened to me on multiple jobs that I've taken. But did they do that? And it happened to one of my students, Emmanuel, in England very recently. He went on an interview. It was his first tech job. They loved him. And within an hour, they called him to say he had a job. Now, if you're in that loved in a position like that, chances are you've got some negotiating power and things on that. Maybe they interview you for an architect role, for example. And when they interviewed you, they went, whoa, I was expecting the tech piece, but I saw this business acumen, this leadership, this executive presence, and that makes you worth another $100,000 a year. If you committed ahead of time, you wouldn't get it. So what you need to really figure out is, what's the role? And then after you figure out what the role is and what you're going to be doing and how good you will be at it, then you can figure out what you're worth. So that's what you really want to do, because at the end of the day, if you love something, you'll pay more for something than if you don't want it in the first place. And that's the strategy that typically goes to job salary. Now, if somebody asks, and I've been asked in every job, now in most of the jobs that are there, they asked me, what are your salary expectations for this position? And I said, to be fair, I don't exactly know what the position is yet, or what I'll be doing to even know what I would want to be paid for that. And at the same time, you don't know me or what I can do for you to determine what I could do for you. So let's talk about that after the fact. I want to make sure we get a good match and a good fit, and I could even help you in the first place prior to making any kind of demands. That usually works. Now, if I was a senior architect that was out there and they said, what are your salary expectations? I would say, well, I'm currently interviewing jobs between $350,000 and say $450,000 a year. Or if I was a brand new architect never working, I would say I'm currently interviewing for jobs between $150,000 and $200,000 per year, or something to that. And that way, you're in a place where you didn't pin yourself down. You're showing your value. So that's typically what you would do. And that's why you want to do it. And that's why you don't want to give too much information. Freedom Lance, that's a really great question. So happy you brought it. Please, others, bring in questions. We want to help. So instead of projects, what is suggested to help with the design learning? Well, it's 2 things. You have to learn all the underlying systems first, and then you have to teach someone to help you put them together. So here's what I mean by underlying systems. It's the same as a physician. They have to know every part of the body and how it works, even if they've never seen it. I'm going to say that again. They have to know every part of the body and how it works without seeing it and learning it conceptually. Because when you're going to put an architecture of pieces together, you have to know everything about it. Now, this is conceptual knowledge. Now, I'm going to tell you what I mean. I'll give you an example. I'll go to a medical thing because it's something I used to do 25 years ago when I practiced internal medicine. And then I'm going to actually get into what I mean. So I have never seen, and this is the way blood flows through the body, I have never seen the blood go through from the left ventricle to the aorta, to go from the ascending and descending aorta to the rest of the arteries in the body, to then go into smaller arteries called arterioles, to then go into little capillaries, to then get recirculated by little microveins called venules, which get dumped into bigger veins, which ultimately gets dumped into the inferior and superior vena cava, which then gets dumped into the right atrium of the heart, which then goes to the right ventricle of the heart, which then goes to the pulmonary arteries, to the lungs to get oxygenated, and comes back through the pulmonary veins to the left atrium of the heart, goes to the left ventricle, and it repeats itself. I've never seen that before. But I'm going to tell you what, if I was going to ever do surgery on someone, I would need to know that. If I'm going to give a medication that may change the thickness or opening of these vessels, I need to understand it and what it will do to blood pressure. So it's the same thing. You have to be like a doctor and learn the underlying stuff. And that's probably why medicine is what I really think was my best preparation for there. So let's think about what we do as architects. Well, an architectural project would be to create a reference architecture for something. An architectural project would be to create an RFP response for a various thing. An architectural project would be to create a thought leadership document, something on something that's modern and current. For example, why defense in depth is not sufficient for modern cloud environments. Modern cloud environments now need defense in depth plus zero trust. And talk about the rationality and describe the problem and describe the solutions and the strengths and weaknesses of various offerings. You know, you could create an architectural project where you talked about large-scale DDoS prevention for a mission-critical web app. But the point is, you're designing for something. You're designing to solve a problem as an architect. It's the exact opposite of building. So these are more architectures, but you're not going to learn design on your own. You're going to have to learn each and every individual element, and truthfully, you need somebody to put it together. And here's what I mean by this, flying cuts. I don't think I ever would have learned how to practice medicine by just learning pharmacology in a vacuum and learning pathology in a vacuum and anatomy and physiology in a vacuum. I'd know a lot about each one of those things, but I had to be taught for this problem. These are the possible options that it could be. Here's the way you determine the exact problem, and here are your treatment options for each problem. That is architecture. So I want you to realistically do that. And I want you to think about that. So that's really what we're talking about, is learning the design. So if I was going to learn the network, if I was going to learn the cloud, I would learn the network. And the network is things like BGP, how it works, how you would use it for traffic engineering, why you would use it to connect to cloud providers, that kind of thing. I would learn what kind of wide area network technology you would use. When would you use an IPsec tunnel versus a software-defined WAN versus a private line versus a SASE WAN? What are the strengths and weaknesses of each architectural option? I would get involved in compute. And there's only 4 compute options in all cloud computing environments and all data center environments. And they're virtual machines, containers, application virtualization, and function as a service. I would learn that and master how it works, know where it's being done and how it's being done. And that way you can design it. And then it's storage. Guess what? It's the same storage that we've had for the last 50 years for the most part. Block storage, object storage, file storage, RAID, those kinds of things. No big deal to think about. It's the same databases we've had for about 50 years for the most part. No SQL databases that I think IBM made in the 70s. Relational databases, which are about that old as well. So some database things to think about. And some security things to think about. Whether they be IDS, IPS systems, VPN concentrators, firewalls, data loss prevention systems, HEAM systems, next generation firewalls, you know, those types of things. And then it's about how do you combine all that stuff together to make it work and do some magic for the client to make it big. So if you think of architecture as designing the hotel, where you contract the architect and say, I want something that's going to be a 5-star hotel. I want 2 pools. I want a golf course. I want 3 hot tubs. I want a spa on site, as well as these 5, 6 amenities and 3 restaurants. And the architect designs a plan for it. And they design a model, what it would look like. And then they hire a construction crew, an engineering crew to go build that hotel. They are the engineers. That's what the engineers do. So the engineers have to be experts at building. And our architects have to be expert designers. Unfortunately, building does not teach you design. You have to be taught design. It's not something that I've actually ever seen somebody just naturally know what to do. At least I didn't. Good question here, Flying Kites. Please ask your questions. We want to help. Andy, how do I get experience in architecture if you're not an architect yet? You're going to have to be taught somehow. And there's, realistically speaking, two ways. Now, let's say you were working at a company like Cisco or Juniper or Arista, and you're there as a post-sales network consulting engineer, configuring routers, switches, building stuff. One thing that you could do if you're in these companies is try to find 2 or 3 people and say, teach me architecture. Can I help work on more architecture projects with you? Now, that would be something that I could highly recommend. Another thing would be to take an architecture course like ours, because we actually teach people. But I'll tell you, when I was younger, it was a lot easier to get design engineering training. There really was. I mean, when I did my CCIE, I did the CCDP at the time, and that was more of a design certification. It was fairly nice. It didn't teach me a lot. It taught me a little bit. And ultimately what happened is I took a lot of training in design. And I started learning, when I was at Cisco, I was at Riverstone Networks prior to them. I was a principal architect at Comcast. I was a lead architect at WorldCom, now Verizon. So I was in a position where I was able to go out there and say, spend the money for this $20,000 course here, spend the money for this course, spend this. And the companies were willing to do it. And then I also got an MBA to help me in architecture too. And that's why I teach all these things in our architecture program. But you're going to need to have somebody teach you. Some things you can figure out on your own. If all you had to do was I had to tell you here's what I want you to do. I want you to set up an AI thing on Ubuntu Linux. You could figure that out. You could go out there and Google. You could figure out what kind of GPUs and CPUs you can need. You could find somebody's recommended build for them, not you. But it would give you a logic thing. And then after that, you could install Linux, and you can install your PyTorch, TensorFlow, and all those other libraries you would need, typically a Python library, and then you could Google it and build it. Now, you could build something like that. You absolutely could. And that will teach somebody how to build. Now, if I say, okay, what I need you to do is determine whether we should use an LLM versus a small language model, RAG versus CAG, and the architectural considerations on our business, how to make sure that our data looks a certain way. What do we need to do from a data normalization perspective? What do we need to do from a security perspective to prevent against things like model poisoning? What do we need to do in the network perspective to enable low latency communication between those? What do we need to do here? That's architecture, and that's why I teach architecture. And I hope that explains why I teach it and why it's not a learn by doing job. It's kind of like surgery. You need somebody to teach you to do it. Kind of like flying an airplane. You need somebody to teach you to do it. You don't want to figure it out while you're in the cockpit at 30,000 feet. You really don't. Because the repercussions of a bad architecture is the business goes bankrupt and everybody loses their job. That's why, typically speaking, you have to get some training. But you may have access to really good network architects where you work that could teach you. And if not, we provide training as well. I hope that kind of helps. Please ask more. And I can highly recommend architecture careers, especially from network engineering. It's a great start. Always love the network engineering background. Chris, we can bring in the next one, and please bring in your questions. Barrymon. Hi, Mike. Thank you for the presentation. What's the main difference between a cloud sales specialist and a cloud architect? And which careers do you especially door-to-door sell? So there's almost no tech jobs where there's door-to-door sales. And here's the reason. A good sales rep is $200,000 a year or more. A good architect is $200,000 a year or more. So you can take a $400,000 a year team and knock on doors. So Barrymon, what companies have is they have inside sales reps. Sometimes they're called SDRs. These are people that spam people all day long, call people all day long, and they try to book meetings for the account team, which is a sales rep and an architect to go. Typically speaking, on a meeting, solutions architect, technical account manager, that kind of thing. So that's there. Now, a cloud sales specialist is a meaningless term that doesn't mean anything. Now, I will tell you that Cisco did have something which might be what you're thinking of, and they called them product sales specialists. And I can tell you what they were. So Cisco had account executives. They were a typical MBA business executive that was the sales rep. And they also had like product sales specialists, maybe somebody who had previously had a lot of knowledge in voice, or a lot of knowledge in security, or a lot of knowledge in AI or something like that. And they typically didn't have all the executive oomph that the account executives did, but they had a lot more technical and subject matter knowledge on that area. Not to the level of an engineer or an architect, but a lot more knowledge than the average sales rep would have, but they had less executive presence. And that's typically the cloud sales specialist, which is a role that would pay somewhere in between typically the account executive and then the architect that you would have in there, because it's, or maybe even less than all of them, because the sales specialist isn't the exact full executive, but they don't have all the technical skills as well. So there's typically that. Now, the architect role itself is going to be extremely good. The account executive role is going to be extremely good. This cloud sales specialist role is kind of anywhere in between. And if we have to look at roles that are critical, I need my architects and I need my sales executives. So it's kind of somebody, the cloud sales specialist is usually someone that's just going to, if it's a title at all that's there, it's usually someone that's going to be a go-between, like a junior sales rep with a little bit of tech knowledge or more industrial knowledge. So if I was looking for a career, it would either be as like a global account manager for one of these companies, or a cloud architect or an enterprise architect. But door-to-door sales, that's not us. That is not in any architecture position. If you were selling vacuum cleaners or cosmetics or maybe knives or plates, you could do that door-to-door. This is dealing with businesses that need you. So somebody has to determine, are they willing to spend $2, $3, $4, $5 million to even get you guys to visit them in the first place in many cases? Hope that makes sense. Great question, Barrymon. Actually, I have a friend with a name so similar. He and I went to a 3-day trip to Canada, theoretically, and a month later, or 3 months later, we were still there. Freedom Lands, is the tech interview mastery program included in the Memorial discount? Yes, absolutely. Everything we have right now is available at 50% off Freedom Lands. Love to see you in that program. Make sure you apply. My team is telling me the code is Memorial Day 20, Day 2025. I'm going to pop that code in the chat box so I don't mistake it. Great question, Freedom Land. I popped a coupon in the chat box. Chris, bring in the next one, and please ask your questions. We just want to help. DE, you have supply chain experience for a decade. Anything you can do, any self projects, any certification that could expedite the journey? Never shy of the hard work. Well, could you tell me what you mean by this journey? I need to know what journey it actually is. Because let's say the journey was to Athens, Greece. I know how to get there. I know which plane to get on. But what if the journey was to Bali, Indonesia? We needed different airplanes. So I need to know where you want to go. Love the fact that you've got some supply chain experience. But the projects that you're actually going to do are going to have to be relevant for your field. An engineering project is different than an architecture project. So I really want to know where you want to go. That's really what I'm looking for. Let me know where you want to go, and I can actually do anything I can to assist you, but it's much more important to know where you want to go before I can give you a path. Let me know and come back, and I'll happily get back to it. Do you think after some time people should go from operative managing hybrid roles, as most jobs are like, to more manager-like work, project unit manager, and so on? So I'm not actually sure I understand what you're saying. So if you're talking about roles where people are in operations, doing stuff every day, and then they want to go into a more strategic area like management, if I interpreted that, then it's typically a leadership change, and it's the skills that are typically that need to change. So when it goes to going from one job to another job, the opportunity is always there. There's almost always an opportunity if you're a manager to move into a director or senior director or VP position. The question is, are you ready for that opportunity? Do you have the skills? Do other people see those skills in you? So I think the way you work is you determine what you want to do and you build a plan to get it. I will tell you, people's first job that are physicians are physicians. They don't work as a medical assistant, and they don't become a nurse, and then they don't become this, and then they become a doctor. They just go straight to become a doctor. Same thing for an airplane pilot. So, if you want to go from an operations role to management, learn management, and you'll be fine. You want to go straight into an architecture role, learn architecture. You want to go straight into a leadership role, study leadership management, and maybe your first job is a manager role. But it's all going to be based upon the skills. So I don't think it matters which way you want to go. I mean, Balwinder's first job that I know of after she was a stay-at-home mom for a decade was a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft after we worked with her. At the same time, Emmanuel's first job was a security architect in England after we worked with them. Nafuli's first tech job was a CTO in Manchester, England. At the same time, Yvonne's first job was over at AWS, and his last job was a waiter. Or Jennifer's first job was a solutions architect out of being a mental health tech at JP Morgan Chase. It really doesn't matter where you're from. It matters what you want to do and how you do it. So I don't believe in any rules that says you have to start at the bottom and work your way to the top, or you have to start here to learn somebody else's job. It takes me just as much time to train a cloud engineer to be a cloud architect that's got 10 years experience as it does a sales rep, because it's a different job. So at the end of the day, be anything you want, anything. But I don't think operations is going to prepare you for strategy, because it won't. Just like playing checkers won't make you a better chess player. It's a different game. But I do think high C, you can do all of it and just do anything you want. Tell me what you want. I'd even love to build you a path to get there, because I really do want to help. It's just, don't think that you have to do something because someone said it. Anybody that I've trained in the last 20 years, they didn't start at help desk. They started in senior roles because they were trained for senior roles. So it's all about what you can do. What do you want to do? Let me know, and then I'll help you build a plan to get there. What tips do I have for leadership? Well, one is get some training here, because leadership is the biggest difference in salary in your business acumen. But so let's talk about things that typically is. One is to use the right leadership style. Know when and to use a command and control style, and know when to use an affiliative approach versus a participative leadership approach, because there's different leadership strategies that you need to use based upon the problems you would solve. The second thing that I can tell you is emotional intelligence and empathy is key. I always think every time I communicate with someone, how would the person on the other side, how would I feel if I was them? And if I understand their perspective, and I would think what I might do if I was their position, and they see that I understand their perspective, it becomes a whole lot easier. One thing I will tell you on leadership is you need to really, the people on your team have to want to work with you. If it's going to be long-term, they have to want to do their job. So you have to make the environment feasible for the people on your team to do their job. If you pick the right people and they care, they're going to do great things if you get rid of the roadblocks in their way. So, but there's a lot of roadblocks your team will face. You might need to bring somebody with you on a project. And what you didn't know is that person you're bringing with you on a project is doing an MBA part-time and is on 16 different other projects in the same company. And if they're not delivering for you, you might need to go in there as a leader and talk to them and say, if I were to speak to your manager, because this is very important, and tell them that you're very valuable, could I got you off of 2 or 3 other projects? Would you be able to deliver things on time? Is there any projects you need help with? Is there anything I can do for you? Do you need training? Do you need 2 days off? Do you need me to move a mountain for you? And I'll tell you, Andy, in most of the larger projects that I've led, it gets hard. And it's about making sure your team is there. So if you think about having a really good tech team, And I made a video about this yesterday called Herding Cats. It was partially as a joke, but it was partially the Cisco leadership term. Is you have to remember that whenever you're in a tech team, you're going to deal with a lot of really cool, really smart people, and they're all a little wacky. And I mean this in the funnest sort of way. One person I know who's super smart, he has 10 versions of the same clothes. And that way, he, worst case scenario, never needs to think of what he wears every single day. And he's got 10 days to do his laundry again. Now, that's one extreme, but I've seen that. I actually worked with someone that only wanted a certain color M&Ms, and we literally were, this person was so smart that we were picking out the right M&Ms they have and putting it in a crystal dish for them because that's what it took for them to be happy. I worked with someone else that needed a shot of Macallan 25 at the end of the day, but if this person got the shot of Macallan 25, they could do things that no one ever did. So at the end of the day, understand that we're dealing with people, and understand if people understand the what and the why behind what they're doing, they're more likely to do it than if you say, just do this. And when you want to manage a team, part of the team is growing the team and getting them to go, not just making you look good, making them look good. So when you're a team lead, like a lead architect, like I usually was, or a manager, as soon as something good happens, everybody says, Mike Gibbs did. And it's like, no. Mike Gibbs didn't do it. It was this person, this person, this person, this person, and this person on Mike Gibbs' team that made it happen. At the end of the day, you still get credit, but you share the credit with their team, and other people see their good work. When people work with me on a large architecture project, I ask them, where do you want to be a year from now, 2 years from now, or 5 years from now? And a lot of them say architect. And if they say architect, I say, okay, you come with me and you stay part of these architectural things. You ask questions, we help you. Maybe somebody else wants to be a leader. I'm like, okay, well, watch what I do here. Let's talk about the leadership things each day. So those are the kind of things that I want you to think about. Those are the things that are leadership. Leadership is being able to exercise influence and get people to want to do things, or customers to buy things. Because at the end of the day, let's say they have a network that's so bad that's going to bankrupt their business, and they need to spend $30-40 million on their networking gear, and you can't convince them to, the business goes bankrupt. So those are the kind of things. Really spend some time here. I can tell you that I did 2 MBAs. I only finished one of them. I did 3/4 of an MBA when I was a kid, and then I got a job that was so big I just didn't finish it. And then I did a different MBA when I was older. And then after that, I got sent to a lot of executive leadership training. I'm very glad I did. So those are the kind of things that will really bolster your leadership. Invest in your training here. Because if you start looking at jobs that pay fairly well in tech, they typically have more leadership. A $800,000 chief architect role is about leadership. A senior director role at Cisco, for example, that's about $550,000 a year at Palo Alto, same thing, is all about leadership, business skills, those kinds of things. So kind of hope that helps. Please ask more. Love hearing from networking people. Spend a lot of time in networking and love networking. Happy to hear from anybody else too. Let's go to the next question, Chris. Omar Farouk. Hi, Mike. What do I think of AI being implemented in the environment and how it's going to affect solution architect jobs in the future? Omar, it's going to create 10 times more of the solutions architect jobs than it ever did. And here's the reason why. It will also be a crushing blow to software developers and many post-end engineering jobs, post-sales engineering jobs. So here's the thing. AI is here. AI is going nowhere. And the world is going to have to come up with a tremendous amount of power. So much so that I think everybody will start to realize that we'll be seeing, explosive growth in nuclear power plants and other things to power AI. And there's nothing going to stop it. And it's interesting. I saw General Motors today canceled basically an electric vehicle factory in favor of a factory that's now building V8 engines again. Now, I don't know why we need a V8 engine unless it's a big truck. My Mercedes SUV has got a 4-cylinder engine in it, and it's just fine. But what we're seeing is the demands of this power are so big that our cloud providers are buying nuclear power plants or investing in them. And anybody that wants to run a big AI data center is going to have to be doing so. So I think you're going to see a flip flop towards, the environmental movement towards, let's say, make some money on this AI stuff, and let's go back to that. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. Now, it's going to create architect jobs, and here's the reason why. Every time there's a new technology, it creates an opportunity for someone to use that technology to enhance business. And it's the architect that creates the strategy that says, in order to increase your sales, we're going to do this. Maybe it's an AI recommendation engine. Maybe it's some personalized, customized discount patterns based upon the client and their past buying patterns and margins that can be tolerated based upon updated things in the supply chain to close a sale. These are the kind of things that AI can do. AI can help an airline spend less on fuel costs by determining when the time is to buy options. AI can code. AI can configure. AI can write a DevOps script, a Python script. Well, none of the things that architects do. So because the solutions architect's going to meet with the clients, meet with the executives, discuss business processes and learn about the organization, present at architectural conferences, speak with stakeholders, manage vendors and things, tech can never do that. It's person-to-person thing. But the engineers behind the scenes that are building it, let's face it, Google's writing 25% of their code with AI. Microsoft's writing 30% of their code with AI. And Facebook's writing 30+% of their code with AI. And they said it, and I believe it, with the $500 million or plus people are with the billions of dollars these companies are investing. They said that AI codes will code better than most software developers in a couple of years. So all these create new opportunities for the architects to design it, but don't think the technology isn't going to build itself for the most part for simple things, or it won't take a very small number of engineers to be able to use AI to build it. But the architects are the strategists that are there. So if you want to think of safe jobs for the future, it's a sales rep, it's a solutions architect, it's a cloud architect, an enterprise architect, an AI architect. It's strategists that are there. It's leaders and people managers that work with people and lead people and make strategic decisions. And why is that? Because AI doesn't strategize. AI can't lead. AI can't influence. AI can't do any of that. But AI sure can code and configure. And thankfully, solutions architects don't do any of that in their jobs anyway. So that's really where I see it. I've actually been published in many magazines. I'm pretty sure I even spoke about this in Forbes and CIO magazine about a year ago, because I was speaking to many magazines, and that's why we stopped selling an engineering program and started more architect programs, because architect roles are the future. I see them as the future. I know why they're the future, and I can see the growth in them. But I kind of hope that makes sense. Can I give examples of architectural specificities of different businesses? Sure. So I'll give you two different kinds. I'm going to give you the business architecture specificity, and I'll give you some technical architecture specificities as well. So I have two businesses here. One business is the Ritz-Carlton, and the next business is McDonald's. Now, at McDonald's, no matter when you walk in, where you walk in, at any part of the world, you'll get the same burger, fries, and a Coke, no matter where you offer them for the most part. And that's because that business architecture has a very tightly coupled architecture. There's very tightly coupled systems. There's very tightly coupled processes. So that is the business architecture. So it's a brief business architecture of McDonald's. Now let's take a Ritz-Carlton, and Chris can always come in from behind if I'm missing something. But you go to a Ritz-Carlton, and it is beautiful. And when you're in the Ritz-Carlton, if somebody's unhappy about something, the employees and the management have the ability to do something about it. You're complaining about something, they'll send you to this courtesy several $100 thing to make you happy. You need help going somewhere, they'll have somebody to find it. You need to know where to go, there'll be someone. Something's wrong with your room, boy, are they gonna fix it. Now, that model at Ritz-Carlton needs a lot of customization. It can't be too standardized. People have to have the flexibility and the autonomy to make it work. So that's how you could have a different kind of architecture for two different kinds of businesses at the business architecture perspective. Now, let's look at some architectural specificities. Let's say I have a coffee shop, and that coffee shop is processing credit card transactions. Now, maybe that coffee shop can get away with an IPsec VPN because it doesn't need guaranteed bandwidth between the coffee shop and the main corporate headquarters locations. Now, at the same time, I might have a bank, and I might have a New York location of a bank and a London location of the bank, and at minimum, I need 100 gigabit per second throughput, minimum, and I can't tolerate more than 6 milliseconds of latency across that overseas link. Now, if I need a minimum of 100 gigs of latency, guess what? It's a bank. They need to be 99.999% available. So that might mean I need 2 or 3 links or 4 links in a certain number of routers. So there's that. But let's say you've got a low latency application, Andy. In a low latency application where it needs to be critical low latency, you might run them on bare metal servers. So you don't have the 5 to 10% overhead latency of, a hypervisor. You might be using NVMe storage and a RAID 0 configuration for that high frequency trading system inside of those servers with a backup RAID 0, so RAID 10. You might have these servers all placed in the same rack, all inside of the same switch. And you might actually have 2 of these side by side if one goes bad. Now, the only reason you would ever create a low latency environment like this is, but if you've got a trading system, and I designed one of the fastest trading systems in the world in my youth for a bank or market maker in New Jersey, and the point was is if they could buy a stock a millisecond before their competition, they might be able to get it a couple cents cheaper. And if they could sell it a couple cents early, they could sell each share for a couple of cents more. But they were doing about 4 million transactions a day. Or was it 4 billion? It was hard to remember because it was 20 some years ago. But that was the kind of thing to remember, is each time the speed made a difference. So that might be one where we did something else. Now, I might have a wide area network, and I might have a shaky link on that wide area link, and a backup link, which is a bit shaky, and I can't handle routes flopping in and out, so I might need to change that. I might need to change the time to live on DNS to reflect a sooner change. I might, in one environment, want less loads on a web server, so keeping the loads lower on the web server, I keep the cache timeout higher on a content delivery network. By comparison, I've got another business that changes their web pages frequently, and therefore we want to lower the TTL on the content delivery network. So realistically speaking, what's cached is cached out quicker, so we have newer, fresher content. So those are like business examples versus technical examples. Another example would be the demilitarized zone connecting to the internet. Can we get away with a cloud provider's basic minimum WAF and an access list and a security group? Or do we need something heavy where we've got layers of next generation firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, web application firewalls with behavioral anomaly detection and more? So those are examples of where we have to look at different businesses in different situations. We can have two restaurants that run their business differently. We have 2 banks that can run their business differently. We can have 2 retailers that run their business differently, and all of them will need different architectures. And that's because they all are different. And it's the same reason, Andy, that if 3 patients came to my office and all of them had the same sore throat infection, pharyngitis, person A might get amoxicillin. Person B might be allergic to amoxicillin, so I may give them azithromycin. Person C isn't intolerant to both of them, but I might be able to give them levofloxacin or something. So we have to, the same way a doctor would look at all the patient's conditions we have to look at the totality of the systems. Which systems are talking to which systems impact each system? What is the impact of a change here in the overall environment? I hope that answers your question. Please ask more, Andy, because these are really good, strong questions you're bringing. And I really do want to help. How should someone decide between the Cloud Architect Career Development Program or the Enterprise Career Development or the Executive Architect Bundle? Well, here's what I would say. If I had to recommend one thing to most people, that would surface everything, it'd be that everybody should learn enterprise architecture. And I'll tell you why I say that, and I'll tell you what our enterprise architect program is, and I'll tell you what the executive architect program is. The cloud architect role is a wonderful role, Freedom Lands. I love it. And honestly, it's one of the top 10 roles for the future. So it's a great role. When we teach enterprise architects, what we do is we put them through our cloud architect career development program. And we give them extra business acumen, extra leadership, extra executive presence, extra oomph, which could make a cloud architect salary 20-30% higher than it would be without these enterprise architect skills. But it gives us an additional 4th class per week to also talk about process engineering and the global executive skill sets. Now, we've got lots of people getting hired in the cloud architect program, and I've had people like Wallace Agana, who never worked in tech before, get his first tech job as an enterprise architect at JP Morgan Chase in England. I've had Jermaine in that program, who was selling landscaping gear from the cloud architect program, hired as an enterprise architect straight after that program. I had Pritipal straight out of that program become an enterprise architect. So there's a crossover in these. But I just think the better you are as a cloud architect and the better you know business, the better you'll be everywhere. So that's why I created that. Now, this executive architect program, well, this is something that I'm pretty impressed with. It's just something that I dreamed about. So all in all, it took me about $300,000 to get the education to be a chief type architect. And I know that's just not feasible. So what I did in this executive architect program is I did a couple of things. One is I found it's David Lithicum and I teach this together. So I teach 2 days during the week in the primary technical class, and David Lithicum teaches 2 other architecture classes in the evening. And that way people in any part of the world. Now in the executive architect program, it is the enterprise architect program plus additional classes with David Lithicum. He was Deloitte's chief cloud strategist or chief cloud architect. So good addition to the team. Additionally, we've got the Tech Interview Mastery program inside of that program. In addition to the Tech Interview Mastery program, inside of that program, we have our Tech Leadership program, which by itself is about $5,000. It is a substantial leadership program. The 3 of us that work here in the company added content to it. All 3 of us, the C-suite holds MBAs. I had 2 PhD business school professors. I've had other leaders help provide insights. So it is a pure leadership program. Plus, it's got a branding program that we had a marketing executive with an MBA and, of course, 30 years of marketing executive experience put on a branding program on how to do it. So any of these programs will help you get to your goal. To be fair, the executive architect bundle is my life's work. It's pretty much everything I've learned in the last 30 years, designed to really get you to the same level that I was and more, because I want better for you than I ever had. So that's what's in that. But all of these are good Freedom Lands. And I hope I helped answer that. Hey, Mike, is a cloud security architect design focus as a cloud solutions architect? So a cloud security architect and a cloud security architect are going to be different. So, and a cloud architect. So let me just, let me put something together. Let me set this up for a minute or so. I'll walk you through the various architecture roles, and I think it'll be kind of clear. So just bear with me a second to find this. If not, what I'll do is I'll draw it out for you, because I really want you to understand where they all fit. Nope, I got one I can show you. So bear with me. So if we walk through this area, let me explain to you what everybody does along the way. So at the top of your IT organization, we've got the Chief Information Officer. Now, the Chief Information Officer holds 2 roles. They own the strategy for the organization, but they also own its operations. Now, managing strategy and operations at the same time is a whole lot of ridiculousness. So what ultimately happens is most of these companies break it down into 2 positions. They'll have, say, a vice president of IT, which does the operations, and you'll typically have a chief architect or an enterprise architect at the top that's a director level or VP level person. And this person is responsible for the architecture strategy. And that way the CIO has their chief strategy advisor, which is basically either the chief technology officer, enterprise architect, chief architect. It's the same job. It's just the enterprise architect goes by a couple of different names. And then they have the operations person that are running it. So now if we look at the cloud architect role, here's what we're realistically doing. So in the actual cloud architect role, we're dealing with all the data centers, all the co-location centers, and all the clouds. What? So the cloud architect role is very similar to this enterprise architect over here in that they own everything. Now, imagine you now have to know the Alibaba cloud, the Dell cloud, the Google cloud, the Azure cloud, the AWS cloud, the Nutanix cloud, the OpenStack cloud, and whatever other clouds you're connected with, because that's reality. Well, that's where we bring in these solutions architects, and these solutions architects can guide us a little more. Okay, I need a virtual machine with 16 cores and 64 gigs of DRAM. The AWS solutions architect can help you determine what EC2 instance that is. You're looking for something like this, the solutions architect can provide you a little guidance on there. So what typically happens is these solutions architects work for somebody else, and they try to sell the cloud architect and enterprise architect into buying their stuff. And the cloud architect and the enterprise architect are typically saying, well, I'll determine if I want your stuff or not. Now, if you note that this cloud architect is covering everything. So that means network architecture roles, security architects, application architects, IAM architects, AI architects. They're all going to be advising the cloud architect. See, this is an executive position. This is 80-90% business, 20% tech. This cloud architect role is about 75% business and 25% tech. These solutions architect roles are probably 60% business, 40% tech. But these techie architect roles are about 50% tech, 50% business. So these are fairly strong people. But you may also notice the network architect might need a router. So they might call a solutions architect from, say, Arista and Juniper that will be feeding into the network architect. So that's the architect continuum as a general rule that we're typically talking about that I hope made sense to you. So that's where the difference is between these architecture roles. It's where you're focused. Enterprise architecture, everything. Cloud architecture, almost everything. Network architecture, network design. Security architect, security design. AI architect, AI design. In that overall, how to make the business better. I hope that answered your question. Chris, you can bring in the next one. For a security architect, is the CCNA level advised or is the Net Plus sufficient? No money, heads up. If I could tell everybody to just skip the Net Plus because it's not sufficient for anything. And I mean anything. Truthfully, the CCNA level isn't sufficient for the cloud architect either. And the reason is we're dealing with an architect or a security architect. They need to understand something. So let me show you something what I mean. Let me pull this up. Now, this book, TCP/IP Illustrated, is IP fundamentals. It'll show you what's in the IP header. It'll show you how various things. There's actually 3 versions of this book. Now, why does it matter? So if you look at an IP header, for example, and you know what's in the IP header, you see the source, the destination, and you see a couple of other things. You'll see protocol, port number, whatever. So if you know what's in that IP header, you can say, okay, what's in that header? A firewall could look at it. What's in that header? We could say, okay, this is mission critical traffic, send it. This is not mission critical traffic, drop it unless there's extra bandwidth. So when you truly understand IP, you're good. Now, when it comes from the security architect perspective, what do you need to know about networking? Obviously, it's going to be subnetting, supernetting. It's also going to include routing. And there's almost no routing in the CCNA or Net Plus. because you have to understand how routes could be injected and poison the network, for example. You have to understand quality of service and how you might use quality of service. You'd have to understand traffic shaping, traffic policing kind of things. You'd have to understand segmentation and micro-segmentation of the network, things like VLANs, private VLANs, what have you. And you would typically need to understand packet filters that you could use, for example, in network-based IDS, IPS systems and firewalls and next-generation firewalls and so many other things. So there's a lot of networking that you do need to know. So much of it. Now, that's what I want you to understand. So, but it's not going to be one thing that's going to be so cut and dry that says you're going to get this in the CCNA. What I'll say is, in my security architect, here's what I typically do, and here's how I train them. Obviously, I have to teach the network, the data center, and the cloud, because without that, somebody won't even know what they're securing. After I teach the network, the data center, and the cloud, then I have to teach security. Security principles, asset classification, things like security design and development type of security, and IAM and risk management, risk mitigation, and basically everything that goes in there. Then I teach Zero Trust and NIST and other types of frameworks as they pertain. And then I get my people certified in the 3 intro level to security certifications that we choose, which is the CISSP, the CISM, and the CCSP. And when you heard me say intro level, look, there's nothing intro level about them, but that's the level of skills you need to have to work in today's world. Because if you have something like the Net Plus, you're not as good as AI. AI knows more than the Net Plus. If you only know the CCNA, AI is going to know more than it. So the CCNA is going to be a phenomenal certification, and it's going to look good for a security person. It really will. But you need to have more security knowledge than you'll gain in the CCNA. That's the difference. Because the CCNA is about, how do I configure this? Enable, config T, interface gigabit 0/0, IP address, put the address, no shut on the interface, router OSPF1, add a network statement, tell it which area you want it to be, and then you're running OSPF. That's the CCNA. The architect level is, which protocol are we using? Where are the security weaknesses in this protocol? Where's the scalability in this protocol? How can I make this protocol scale? How can I shield the CPUs on the routers from too many routes flapping into certain things so the routers don't crash? It's a different thing. Does that help? Because I really want to make sure I can answer that. I want to make sure that's clear. You know what? Why don't you join me on the How to Become an Architect webinar we're going to run tomorrow. It's completely free. And on that webinar, what we can do is you can ask me questions live. I'll do anything I can to kind of help you. So maybe you join that. I'll have Chris drop that link from there. Does the Cloud Architect Career Development Program cover all the MBA skills you need to be a cloud architect? We call it a career development program because it covers every skill you need to be an architect and get hired as an architect. That's why we call it a career development program and not a training program. To me, training implies that we're going to teach you a skill. Like, you know how they would teach a seal how to balance a ball on its nose? That's the way I was taught training was. A skill is like this. Here's how you click these boxes on the thing. Here's how they configure these things. It's a how to go there and be right now. So those are the kind of things that I would typically say. So, you know, that's a skill. Now, career development, professional development is about learning everything. It's about learning the skills to be great at actually what you do, how you do it, when you do it, where you do it, and why you do it. So I kind of hope that makes sense to you. So we cover everything that you need from an MBA program and nothing that you don't. And that's why our students are getting hired all the time. Chris, we can bring in the next one. What is the minimum cost for a Cloud Architect program with installments? So the minimum cost is exactly what's on the website at 50% off if you add the code. You have an AWS Solutions Architect Associate, and let's assume you have a Solutions Architect Professional. Is it going to help? Nope, we're still going to have to teach you from scratch. And here's the reason why, Rohit, In the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, you learned how to configure the names of an AWS thing and how to configure it. And guess what? Probably taught you how to do that pretty well. But you want to know what you're actually going to do in the actual job? Well, I promise you, it's going to be something very different. You're going to be managing stakeholders. Are you familiar with managing stakeholders across a global enterprise? You're going to be having to help sell $1 billion solution. Do you know how to build a business case to sell $1 billion solution? You're going to be creating architectural review boards. Do you know how to create an architectural review board or even lead an architectural review board? You are going to have to learn how to facilitate a meeting and facilitate a meeting that may have 20 or 30 architects in that you're leading that architecture team to design something. Do you know how to write a thought leadership document to drive an industry towards a certain technology? Do you know how to build a CIO council or CTO council? I promise you will be doing it as an architect. Do you know how to respond to an RFI, RFP, or RFQ? So do you know how to lead a proof of concept where you've got 10 engineers and you mediate between those engineers and the customer and you escalate things in the back end? That's what we're doing in the job. So there's almost nothing related to the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, which is a sysadmin job. How do I click this versus what to do? What we'll ultimately have to do is we're going to have to teach you cloud architecture, which means we're going to have to teach you the underlying infrastructure and how that infrastructure would be applied. And I can give you an example. You've done the AWS things, and I'll give you some technical questions, which I'm pretty sure you won't be able to answer, but any architect would be. For example, if I were to say to you, you've got 2 direct connections to AWS across 2 different internet service providers. How do you load share across each connection without getting out of order packets? You'll see that you'll have no idea how to do that even after the AWS Advanced Networking, because it's strategy, not doing. Now, if I were to say, could you talk to me about the storage performance that we get from AWS provisioned IOPS compared to NVMe RAID array storages in the data center? And could you talk to me about what we might do or need to do to mitigate any performance considerations? Could you do it, or would you know where to go start? And the answer is, I know you won't know because it's not covered in the AWS curriculum. So the good news is you won't have to take the certification in the end. So the way I want you to think about certifications is this, Rohit. They look good. They might even get you an interview. The problem is I've interviewed 1,000 AWS certified people and asked them basic things. Could you describe cloud computing to me? And they couldn't answer it. If I asked them to explain the difference between a virtual machine and a container and their use cases and strengths and weaknesses, they couldn't explain it to me, but you'll be doing that job every single day as an architect. When they said, I know how to set up DynamoDB, I said, could you tell me about why I might not be able to use DynamoDB in most enterprise environments? If I ask them, how do you scale a relational database? They don't know. So unfortunately, the AWS Solutions Architect Professional is a systems admin job, the name of something and how to do it. But they're not without merit. So here's what we do, Rohit. One is we teach you how to be an architect because you can't get hired without the knowledge for the job. So we teach you every skill you possibly would need. And then when we're done, we prepare you for the 3 best architecture certifications, which are the Solutions Architect Professional, or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert, or the Google Professional Cloud Architect. One of those 3. But that won't get you hired, but it will get you an interview. So you got to be able to get hired first, get the skills first. The next certification we typically recommend and teach is TOGAF 10, because that's an enterprise architecture framework to make sure that you get some value out of your architecture. And the last one we teach is our intro level to security, which is the CISSP. And I joke when I say intro level to security because it's the top 5% of security people that even know that. But that's our entry level minimum standard, and that's what we teach. So by the time people are done our $1,000 architect program, they have the skill for any job they want. That's why you'll find our people at Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the main banks and the main technology players. That's why. So we will make it that you'll know how to get people to come to you, build a recruiting network, have people come to you for the rest of your life and constantly pester you and saying, Rohit, are you looking for a new job? At least that's what they do for me. And if you follow our instructions, that should happen for you as well. But finding a job with the skill is honestly, it's not a big deal. It's impossible to hire an architect. I can do 1,000 interviews and I can't find one person that can do the job. Because they thought the job was configuring. They thought it was Linux. They thought it was Python. They thought it was DevOps. And they didn't understand the real job was strategy, advising, what do you call it? Discussing trade-offs, planning which trade-offs are best for you. Hope that helps. Please feel free to ask more. You meant the journey of being a cloud architect. So that makes total sense. What could you do? You've got to learn how to be an architect. So that's going to be the thing that you need to do, is you have to learn the underlying architecture. So what are we really talking about here? How do I simplify it and make it as simple as possible? One is, Chris, drop a link to the How to Get Your First Solutions Architect or Cloud Architect job link, because I really want that to help, because that's really going to guide you. And two is, drop the link for tomorrow's free webinar, because I want them to have I want the person to have right now DE, something they can immediately look at, and then I want to have a conversation with DE live if possible on the Zoom webinar tomorrow. But the key to remember is you have to understand the technology, its relationships to each other, and how it fits together. So at the end of the day, what you really need to realize for the role is, it is a role of multiple disciplines. And what I mean by that is, you need to understand networking, compute, storage, security, big data, AI, and cloud design. So obviously we teach them, but what does that really mean when I say network design? Well, how do you connect to the cloud? How do you connect your clouds to each other? What is the right type of connection that's going to give you the performance you need? Now, you may not know, but if you design your IP addressing plan, your network will come crumbling down if it's not designed properly. So you'll have to understand address planning, and that's things like where you would summarize your routes, where you would subnet your site arrays, that kind of thing. And you're also going to need to know routing and switching and BGPs. But, for us, we'll teach you. But, those are the kind of things you need to know from the network side. Now, you still have to understand compute, and the good news, there's only 4 options. You have to understand virtual machines and containers and application function, virtualization and function as a service. But you have to understand how it works. Why would I choose this virtual machine over another virtual machine? Why would I use this processor over another processor? How do I calculate how much DRAM we might need for this opportunity? What kind of storage performance do we need? What kind of storage do we use? Do we use block storage, object storage, file storage, RAID, or is that all too slow and we need to do something else, like maybe get a storage gateway from NetApp, which connects us to FSS for Lustre, for example, for high performance in the cloud, because the cloud's typically slower. How do I design the security? What's going to go into security? What's incident response to procedures, demilitarized zones, security policies, data loss preventions, incident response procedures, IAM systems, all that kind of stuff. Big data, like how you would set up data pipeline, or not build, but like what goes into a data pipeline, a data lake, streaming data, those kinds of things. How would you design your AI systems? What kind of AI systems would benefit business? That's what we typically do. So that's what you have to understand first, is you have to learn that tech. Now, then you have to learn how the tech combines. Okay, I want to do AI. So what kind of data do we need? Do we have the data? Do we not have the data? If they have the data, is it clean? If not, how do we clean the data? What kind of a model do we use? How do we build the model? Do we choose a model, create our own model? How do we tune the model? You see where I'm coming from? That's the architecture piece. So it's like learning to practice medicine, which is something that I know a little bit about. You have to be taught. And but you can easily get there. So I want you to keep track of that. And now, architecture projects you could do. Well, the first thing is, if you put the right project out there, it's going to get the world to come to you. You put the wrong project out there, it's going to keep the world away. So let's say, you're in supply chain. Could you create an architecture that would improve business supply chain performance? Where are the typical weaknesses in supply chains in various enterprises? Where are the gotcha points? How do those gotcha points affect people along the way? Where do those gotcha points affect efficiencies? And what would it take to fix it? And maybe you create a reference model that could be used in a bank versus a retailer versus a hospital versus this kind of company. Talk about the pain points and problems they have, and talk about the technologies that can do that. Maybe it's this piece of tech and this piece of tech and this piece of tech, and how do they fit? That's an architecture project. That's going to show the journey. So That's what we mean by architecture. Now, if you set up a DynamoDB, what thing? I'd be like, okay, yeah, but why? So it's going to be a strategy. Now, if you're able to go out there and start presenting at conferences and write articles where you can talk about optimizing supply chain with various technology things, and maybe you can have an architecture using blockchain to capture things where they're at in the supply chain, potentially doing it. Maybe there's various. So these are the kind of things that I want you to take care of. And that's what architecture is. So maybe join me on the webinar tomorrow. I'll make it real clear for you, but I kind of hope that helps. Oh, Dingleman. Why do companies make you fill out the application process after they decide to hire you? Well, if you did it our way, and Dingleman, I know you, and Dingleman, I know you've got a lot of really good options right now because you're super smart. You've been following what we told you, and I can't wait to see which of the options you choose. So why is it? Well, the key is, here's why job descriptions are so crazy, and here's why I typically don't like to apply for jobs. So here's the reality. I want to hire someone. I call someone in HR, fill out a form. The HR person writes a job description about a job they don't know. They have no idea what it is. So what they do is they Google and they find job descriptions written by other HR people that have no idea what the job actually is. So by the time they're done, they've got a 100-page job description, and the job description lists like 50 Olympic gold medals, 400 years experience, and things that don't even exist because the people that made it had no idea. So that whole process takes 3 months. So we get some ridiculous job description, and whatever people pass these ridiculous job descriptions, 90% of the time have no idea how to do the job. So what we hiring managers do is we say, the heck with this internal thing. We go hire an external recruiter. The external recruiter brings capable people to me. I'm the manager, and I say, oh, Dingleman, what brings you in today? We interview. I decide to hire you. And then I say, Dingleman, here's what we got to do. I'm hiring you, but thankfully we kept HR out of the process. But now we got to do this. I'm telling HR you're hired. I'm telling them your start date. Now all you got to do is fill out this form so that we can have you on record as applying. That's why they make you fill out the application after they've decided to hire you, if you strategically applied for things like I know you do and know how to do. That's why. And because otherwise HR will reject you before the manager will see you, even if you're the best person for the job. So this way you'll get hired, and a year later or 6 months later, you'll get an auto rejection from HR, but you're already in the payroll and it doesn't matter. That's why companies do it. And it is absolutely, absolutely crazy. How does Rule 11 of RFC 1925 apply to AI and its impact on technology? So Rule 11, for those of you that are not familiar, is probably one of the most important things you should think of, is that every old idea will come back again with a different name and a different presentation, regardless of whether it was a good idea or not in the first place. Now, Andy, you know what? You know when the first time I worked on AI was? 2000. It was an AI trading system. David Lithicum from my team, the first time he worked in AI was in 1980. So AI is not new. And any of the microservice concepts aren't new. They had other versions of that, and everything is old. So, you know, it's really funny. About a year and a half ago, I mean, every solutions architect at AWS made this big post on LinkedIn. It was hilarious. Big news. It changes the world. You can now run IPsec over a direct connection. And all of us that were network architects were like, didn't I do that on a Cisco router back in 1998? And the answer was yes. So, but now it's called the direct connection. It's the same technology. No, when I first started, it was a frame relay link and then an ATM link. And then I helped work with a lot of the providers design their BGP VPNs. And then after that, I helped with a lot of the providers design VPLS and pseudo wire type things. So the key is it's just coming back, and it's just the same thing. You know, when we get to the cloud and we deal with the virtual machine, it's the same virtual machine that VMware invented in 1999. AWS just says it's our Nitro hypervisor. I mean, it's the same thing. Google's got their own hypervisor, but it's all identical technology. The same block storage, object storage, and file storage in the cloud. It's just that Google decided to call object storage cloud storage, and AWS decided to call it Amazon Simple Storage Solution, and Microsoft decided to call it Blog, but it's the same storage from, say, 1970. Nothing's changed. If we go back and we actually look at the first mainframes, and these things, some of them were actually doing things that were near like AI. These things are old, and they're still there, and people are still investing. So just understand it's just going to be the same thing that we're going to be trying to do again, again, and again. And that's really what it's going to be. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind again and again and again, which means all these network arguments we had earlier, we'll probably go back to them. To how do we do it? All the compute arguments will go back and forth. All the protocols we use, I promise you, will be just like some other protocol we used in the future. Sure, we'll find some new inventive way to tunnel BGP. First, it was for interdomain routing, then it was for interdomain multicast routing, then it was for BGP VPNs. Now it's for what do you call it, VLAN. So same stuff again and again and again. So same thing with AI. And guess what we're probably going to see with AI? When I started, I was one of the few people that came out and started using the internet in the beginning. When I did my CCIE in 2000 or 2001, my number was 7417. That's how long ago it was. People didn't even know what a router was or a switch was. Then everybody invested in these tech companies. Then all but the best went bankrupt. And then the strong companies went and changed the world. So I think we'll see the same thing. You'll see 80% of these AI startups that are not really startups at all. It's a developer that said, oh, I'm going to design something, but they didn't ask the client, do you want this? Does this solve any problem? And they just created some stuff. And what you'll see is the really good AI stuff, boy, is that going to grow and change the way we live, work, and play, just like Cisco did in the internet boom. But the bad stuff will probably just disappear. What can we expect for the GCP Professional Bootcamp? How many days? So it's going to be a long boot camp, and it's going to be about 10 days straight. Several hours per day. Because in this particular one, it's not going to be straight. It'll be 5 days one week and 5 days the next. We're going to have lectures and a lot more labs. I had Leo from my team actually build some of this stuff out. And thought maybe we would demo it too. So we're going to have some demos, which is going to make it longer than normal. But it should be a lot of fun, and I hope you join. And it's completely free, so sign up. Do we have ties-ins with companies who pick our students from our Cloud Architect program? I mean, if you enroll in our Cloud Architect program, can it guarantee us a job? Well, there's two different things. One is, yes, we've had a director from AWS come and talk to why he likes to hire our students. One is we had another VP out of a cloud company talked about why he wants to hire students. So everybody knows who we are. Now, if you take our program and you do the work, you will stay on our program until you are hired. But I can't guarantee that you're going to do the work, Rohit. When we tell you to give a presentation and practice the presentation, I can't guarantee you're going to do it. And if I tell you don't do these labs, but focus on this design and do this, I can't guarantee you can do it. And that's why Oxford, Cambridge, IIT, Yale, Duke University, and any other prestigious university can never guarantee anyone, because they can't guarantee that the students will do what they're told. So I can't guarantee you. And that's why there's not a single guarantee at any respectable medical school, law school, university in the entire world. Now, I do know companies that guarantee you a $30,000 or $40,000 job, and they charge you 10 and 15 and 20 times what I do. I know plenty of those. I've had to rescue their students and their graduates because they didn't know anything, but I can't guarantee that you do the work. But you will have no problem getting a job, and you'll be allowed to stay on our program until you're hired, but I can't guarantee that you do the work. And that's why me nor any other university in the entire world that's legitimate can actually guarantee anything. But I can tell you, if you do the work, you should be like our students, earning quite a good salary and having a great life that you love. And we do this model because it enables us to basically charge our costs and keep people in it until they are successful. Don't want to get ourselves down a boot camp. We want to stay on the clean, ethical side, just like any prestigious institution. Great question, though, Rohit. When you receive offers for Azure Architects, the requirements are more configuration level. Could this be because your profile is poorly designed, or does the company want someone who can do everything? So, Jesus, you will not be allowed to touch the technology if you're at Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG. Security would most likely walk you out the door. Now, I talk about why job descriptions are so bad. And you may see job descriptions that have nothing to do with architecture roles. It's so bad. And the reason is I want to hire an architect, and here's what happens. I call HR, and HR writes a job description about a job they don't even know. It got so bad that what happened is Gartner started asking CIOs, what do you really want in a cloud architect? Seriously, because we know it's not this. And the CIOs had a very simple response. They said, this is what we want our architects to do, these three things. Lead the cultural change for cloud adoption, develop and coordinate a cloud architecture, and develop a cloud strategy and coordinate adoption process. Now, leading the cultural change for cloud adoption means meeting with the client's executive, getting their sponsorship, finding who the key stakeholders are, working with those stakeholders, getting their needs, getting their buy-in, getting their sponsorship. Now, developing and coordinating the cloud architecture means building your architecture team of 15 to 50 people and designing something that's going to optimize business performance. And developing the cloud strategy and coordinating the adoption process is, do we go hybrid cloud, hybrid multi-cloud? Where do we put our workloads? Do we refactor? Do we lift and shift? Do we go here? So that's really the three things they wanted us to do. And then finally, Gartner said, oh, come on, CIOs. It's got to be more than that. And they said, yeah, find talent with the necessary skills. Well, that's why I've interviewed 6,000 people. Assess applications, hardware, and software. Yeah, that's why you create an architecture team. Then it said create a cloud broker team, which is your architecture team. And then it said establish best practices for cloud across the company. That is true. Every demilitarized zone will look like this. Everything should look like this. Definitely do that. It said select cloud providers and vet third-party services, which is, yeah, sure. So in a normal enterprise, we've got 50 to 100 vendors we have to deal with, and each one of them has an offering we might use in our cloud architecture. So we're going to have to meet with them and see what's in the best interest of our clients after evaluating all trade-offs. Oversee governance and mitigate risk. Absolutely. We create governance structures and architectural review boards and change management practices. It said working with security to monitor IT privacy and develop incident response procedures. Manage budgets and estimate cost and operate at scale. So as you can see, there's no techie. So, but the job descriptions may be wrong. Now, it could also be your resume. So, hey, Zeus, I had a student. I'll call him A. A was in Canada. A was working at Home Depot in a non-tech role. A was brutally smart. Now, A decided to do an AWS SysOps against our advice, an AWS DevOps and developer certification, all against our advice. He was a client of ours and a very smart guy, someone I have a deep respect. He kept saying, Mike, on every interview, they keep asking me DevOps stuff and coding stuff, and it's nothing like you told me about. And I said, hey, can I take your resume in class and can we fix it? And he said, what do you mean fix it? He's like, but anything at this point. So I took his resume. I got rid of everything coding related, everything configuring related. I got rid of the DevOps, the SysOps, and the developer certification. And I replaced it with architecture things like leading architectural review boards, designing architectures for XYZ, responding for our RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, this, and anything that architects did, which I know he did because he did it in class. Poof, within about a week, he had 3 offers, right? About a week, maybe it was a month, he had offers, and nobody talked to him about the tech. So if your resume is wrong, you're going to get the wrong calls because your LinkedIn profile and your resume is your brand. So regardless of what you put in the title, if you basically show photos of you boxing every day, for example, and you got black eyes and every photo has a boxing gloves, people are going to think you're a boxer, even if you're a cardiothoracic surgeon. So we have to make sure that your thing is alignment. If you want, I can look at your profile tomorrow during the How to Become a Cloud Architect webinar, and I can immediately tell you if there's something that's causing you to get different kinds of questions. I'll be able to look at it in a minute. I'm happy to do it on tomorrow's free webinar because I really do want to help. But that's typically, but no, they don't want you to be doing tech stuff. They want you to be an architect. Anthony, deciding between CISM and CISSP. Which should you get first, even considering both? What a good question. So, Anthony, when it comes to certifications, what I say is we have the best of the best, then we have second best, and then we have stuff that nobody cares about, for the most part, for good, high-paying jobs. The best of the best are the CISSP, the CCIE, and the CCDE. They are the best of the best. So, Anthony, if I could only pick one for nearly all goals in security or architecture, it would be the CISSP. because it covers everything, and it covers it at that architect slash manager slash strategic level. So all in all, I'd say if I had only one security certification, I would rather see the CISSP than A plus, Net plus, Security plus, AWS Advanced Security, and a couple other basic security things. One CISSP is worth more than that. Now, the CISM I like, and I'll tell you why I typically teach the CISSP, the CCSP, and the CISM together. And that's my 3 favorite certifications right now for security architects, and here's why. The CISSP is a generic everything from security policy to security strategy to what you could do on the network, what you could do on the applications, wireless security, RF frequency interference security. I mean, everything. So that's kind of your big global. Absolutely love the CISSP. The CISSP was my intro to security. It was the first security course I ever taught. And then I learned after that, and it gave me the fundamentals. So I do that. Now, when I train a security architect, obviously I have to teach architecture first because there's not enough of that in these certifications. And then after that, I go straight to the CISSP, and then I add the CISM and the CCSP. And I'll tell you why I use this combination. The CISSP is general security. The CCSP is cloud-specific stuff that you need to think about and all the wacky challenges you have on the cloud. And then the CISM is, realistically speaking, going to help you understand what your chief information security officer is thinking. So if you're an architect and they're taking a CISM, which is more of a CISO certification, it'll help you better relate to your client, better understand what they need. So I really like the CISM certification, but to me, it's a second. So if my first tier is things like the CCIE, CISSP, CCDE, my second tier things are things like the CISM, the CCSP, maybe a Cisco Certified Network Professional certification, maybe a AWS Solutions Architect Professional or an Azure Solutions Architect Expert, not for architects, but for engineers, or Red Hat Certified Engineer. That's kind of like your tier 2 certifications that still are valuable. When we start getting less than that, we get into the lower value ones like the AWS, like an A plus, Net plus, Security plus, like a cloud practitioner. These are really beautiful certifications in their mind. But the problem is these certifications don't get you skilled enough to be as good as AI. They'll make you half as good as AI, but we're in a world where you have to be better than AI to get hired. So they're just not enough in today's world. Quite frankly, I don't think they've ever been enough, which is why I've never had started with them. But they're well-meaning. There's nothing wrong with the certifications, but you need something that's got the brand recognition that the manager says, I want to talk to. So those are the reasons I recommend the certifications that I do. But I would do the CISSP first. And that's exactly what I did. Okay, this is the last question. How do you deal with clients that insist on taking decisions that will hurt the business, even though you explain to all the trade-offs? What do you do in this case? So, Andy, if you properly explain the trade-offs, they're usually going to go with you. But I don't think you explained the correct trade-offs. And here's what I mean. Now, and I'll ask you, you can tell me if I'm wrong. Now, when you're really talking trade-offs, you have to deal with the decision makers, and you also have to deal with the technology teams. The decision makers very quickly need to know, how is this going to impact either my top line revenue or my operating expenses? So it's either going to have to cut down costs or it's going to increase revenue. It has to do that, or it has to enable something that's going to do that. So, and I can tell you, here's where I learned this. I used to work for a company. I won't mention the name of the company, and they had the best network engineers and architects I ever saw. These people were all freaky geniuses. Everybody that was left in this company after the 20 layoffs that had been there was just so smart. It was terrifying. Now, what would happen, Andy, is in almost every case, these people would demo their box and their solution. And in every technical decision, we always came out on top. And here's what the architects and salespeople would say. We won technically, but we lost the deal to Cisco. Now, Andy, I was in an airport. I was in Texas. I just lost another deal to Cisco, and I saw the Cisco account team that I'd seen in and out. And we got to, so we started speaking, and they said, I said, one of the Cisco people said, I'm sorry, you had a loss. I heard some good things about you. And what I said is like, how do you win? Like what, like how? I'm like, what is it you guys know? I'm like, even if you could just give me a little bit of secret, I said, I'm not trying to take your win from you, but I want to learn from me. And what they said is, they say, you guys sell on tech. You go to the C-suite and you talk about packets per second. You go to the C-suite and you talk about latency on a link. We built them a business case that showed how much money they could make by adding these edge routers and what it would do to their subscription services for people. And I went, oh. And then I went back and asked our VP of systems engineering and solutions architecture, like, why aren't our people doing that? And he's like, don't worry about that. Let's focus on the tech. Now that business pretty much lost so much money, they had to get sold to another company. And I went to Cisco. So now I communicate to the C-suite and things they care about. I explain how it will impact their business, what additional money is going to come into them, how it will affect their business, what happens if we don't. I promise you, you're not going to have as many problems. So you have to speak the same language. And if you explain, so Andy, did you explain the trade-offs in business terms that they understood? Financial metrics? Did you give them a ROI model on what was in it and the cost for not doing it? And then the benefits for doing it? That's what it takes to convince people to actually do it. And that's honestly why they created these architecture roles, because the engineers are so smart behind the scenes. They make everything possible, the engineers, but they're typically focused on the tech, and the companies hire the business people because they don't understand the tech. They don't understand the tech people, and that architect is kind of the go-between between the executives and the techies. So try a different approach. I don't think you'll have a problem. But to be fair, Andy, I'll give you the advice that was given to me. And it was given to me 20 years ago, and it was when I was a real young $150,000 sales engineer, almost 25 years ago. My manager pulled me into his office and said, Mike, do you know the difference between a $150,000 sales engineer solutions architect doing what you're doing and a $300,000 enterprise architect? This was a good 20 years ago, more than that, actually. 22, actually. And I said, no, but please tell me. And he said, Mike, you are a tech expert. He said, you're a CISSP or a CCIE. You know all of this better than half of the people out there. He said, but that's the limit of your impact, the tech. My manager said, now imagine you could take this and you can influence an internet service provider to go spend $2 billion to enhance the offerings they have. And they spend $2 billion and they make $10 billion back in return. And you take this bank and create a new trading system that creates a few $100 million of additional income from one server. Now, when you can do that, now all of a sudden you're a $300,000 architect. He said, so build your leadership skills, build your scale skills. And he said, you have to increase your ability to exercise influence. Now, admittedly, I got the second MBA at that point. I took about $20,000 of leadership and exercising influence training. And then after that, I had no problem training it. So that's why we train these skills for our architects, because these are the stopping points. You've got to be able to convince the client to adopt it. You have to be able to show what's in it for them. And it's what they think matters, quite frankly, is going to be completely different than what you think matters as an engineer. Now, when you become an architect, you're going to know what the engineers care about, and you're going to know what the architects care about, and you're going to be the mediating point in between. You're going to work with those engineers. You're going to love them, but you're also going to work with the business people, and I think you're going to fun with them too. That's what you have to do. You have to make sure you explained it correctly. It's a really great question. Okay, Chris said there's one more. I will address it. Do I think ITIL or Agile Project Management is that relevant to an architect? I'm not a project manager. I am a leader. And there's a big difference. So, and ITIL, I don't think it's going to help you. TOGAF, maybe, but ITIL, definitely not. So, when it comes to an architecture, there's two kinds of leadership. There's the project management, and then there's the leader. You have to be the leader versus the project manager. And here's the difference. So I can remember working on this architecture where I had 50 architects and engineers that were working for me, and I was the lead. I'd talk to the people, bring them in the room. This person had a rough day. I'd buy this person scotch. This person needed to talk to someone. I'd talk to this person. Everybody go to the dinner night, take them out, entertain the team, do team building activities. That's the leadership stuff. Now, at the same time, Andy, if I'm trying to lead a team that needs to work for me, and they don't actually work for me, I borrowed them from the rest of the team, they have to want to work. So I have to be the fun boss, the fun leader, the fun that gets everybody together. Now, at the same point, if I've got an RFP that we need to respond to as an architect, and it's 300 pages, and I have to divide those 300 pages of responses between 50 architects, somebody has to make sure that Aguilo, Nico, Apostoli, and Evangelos all turn in their work and turn it on time. So I need a project manager to do that. So the project manager might say, Evangelos, do you have your thing ready? And Evangelos says yes and turns it in. Now, maybe Apostoli didn't turn his thing in, and the project manager needs to check on them. So you will always have a project manager with you, but you're going to have to do more leadership-y things. So you need to focus more on being an executive, not a project manager. It's a different kind of leadership. So not necessarily going to be what I would do. You will do light project management, but if you learn leadership and you learn how to manage, it'll be pretty easy. But you're not making project plans, that kind of thing. Good question there, Andy. And Ariva, obviously privacy is part of the security architect program because privacy is one of those key things. And in our architect program, which is about 1,000 hours, we spend a lot of time on privacy, but it's far more than just privacy. We cover it all. Okay, so hope everybody got some questions answered on building a cloud architect career or a security architect career or an AI architect career or an enterprise architect or even a network architect career. I want to remind everybody that we have 50% off on all of our programs for a very short time for the Memorial Day sale. Chris from my team can drop the link to that. I want to remind everybody that tomorrow we have a completely free webinar on how to become an architect, like a cloud architect. We'll go over the role. We'll talk about what we do. We'll talk about the skills you need, how to stand out, and how to bypass HR so you don't get auto rejected. It's all free, and then we'll answer any questions you want live and free. It'll be on Zoom. And at the same time, we've got a free Google Professional Cloud Architect Certification Bootcamp next week. So come join us. It's free. It's fun. I look forward to meeting so many of you there. Take care, everyone. If you had a good time, maybe leave it a like, maybe subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to help you in your architecture.